Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Before we continue, I will go ahead and mention once again that I am not a lawyer and I am not certified to practice law in Vietnam. I'm just simply a foreigner from the United States who knows a thing or two about the Vietnamese labor code. Now, we're going to go ahead and move on. So, we had to go ahead and stop earlier at Article 97. This is Part B of this series. Maybe a Part C, but we'll figure that out. We can only do these in 25, 30-minute intervals. That's why we have to cut them off every now and then. So let's move on. Article 98, overtime and night work pay. This is the big one. Overtime is a big problem here in Vietnam because a lot of workers need to work more so they can provide for their families, but yet their employers do not pay them what they are supposed to. Just like in the United States, the same rules apply. We will go ahead and go through this together. So you got Article 98, Article 98. Now I'm going to, again, scroll these up so that they match. So, Article 98, overtime and night work pay. Clause 1, an employee who works overtime will be paid an amount based on the piece rate or actual salary as follows. Subclause A, normal days, at least 150%. So, if you work past your normal 8 hours a day, you get time and a half. That's what 150% means, time and a half. 1.5 times what you're supposed to receive. On weekly days off, if you are summoned to come into work on your day off, you're supposed to be paid twice what you're supposed to be paid. But the thing is, though, is the fact that this is, I think, reserved for when you already hit 40 hours. So this is if you hit more than 8 hours. This is if you hit more than 40. This is what I think. So you work 6 days a week. If they want you to come in on your 7th day, because you're supposed to work 6 days a week according to Vietnam, rules and stuff like that. Foreigners are used to 5 days, but Vietnamese work 6 days a week. So if they want you to come in on your only day off, they have to pay you at least 200% what you're supposed to be paid. And it says so right there. 200% what you're normally supposed to be paid. Now, if they want you to work during public holidays, if they want you to work during public holidays, paid leave, that kind of thing, 3 times your normal salary, not including the daily salary during the public holidays or paid leave for employee receiving daily salaries. So essentially, you need to be paid 300%, but this does not include the daily salary during the public holidays or paid leave for employees receiving daily salaries. So if you're not on a contract and you're just receiving a daily salary, I don't think this really applies to you. This letter C doesn't really apply to you. The other two might. Anywho, moving on. So we're starting to generate a little bit more interest in this channel now, and that's great. I'm hoping to go ahead and reach English teachers from Phu Quoc Island all the way to Sapa here in Vietnam. I want to be able to reach everyone in Vietnam and let them know about what their rights are and what they can do in case something bad happens. And again, I'm going to go ahead and say this one more time. If you're having a problem with your English center, please consult an actual lawyer. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a guy who knows the labor code. That's it. Consult an actual lawyer. It's about 50 million dong, and it takes about 4 to 6 months to take your English center to court. If you have the money and your English center is messing with you and you can prove it, take them to court. The more bad English centers that shut down, the better, because that leaves the good English centers for the kids to actually go to where they can learn English in a nice environment. Moving on. Clause 2, an employee who works at night will be paid an additional amount of at least 30% of the normal salary. So say, for instance, we're going to go ahead and use the trusty calculator here one more time. So say, for instance, you go ahead and work an amount, I don't know, and this amount, I think that if you read further on, over or nighttime pay is like after 2,200 hours, I think, 2,300 hours. So that this does not apply to English teachers. This only applies to essentially factory workers and people who work night shift, like customer service reps for foreign companies and stuff like that. So let's just use an English teacher salary, just for grins. So we go ahead and say 480,000 is what you normally get. So if you work at night, you're supposed to get a pay raise of 0.3, 144,000 dong, because that's 30% of your salary. So this plus 480,000 dong means you're supposed to be paid 624,000 dong instead of 480,000 dong for working at night. So right there. Now, clause 3. An employee who works overtime at night will be paid, in addition to the salary specified in Clause 1 and Clause 2 of this article, an amount of at least 20% of the day work salary of a normal day, weekend, or public holiday. So essentially, an employee who works overtime at night, in addition to getting the pay raise for working at night and their base salary, they also get at least 20% more of the day of work salary of a normal day, weekend, or public holiday. So they get more money if they actually hit overtime. And Clause 4, the government shall elaborate this article. Now, suspension pay. Suspension pay is a big one. Suspension could be for a lot of reasons. It can be for if the employee is acting up, if the employer can't give the employee any work, if the virus comes back and all the businesses have to shut down. All that. So, moving on. Article 99, suspension pay. In case of a suspension of work, the employee shall receive a suspension pay as follows. Clause 1. If the suspension is at the employer's fault, the employee shall be paid the full salary under the employment contract. Says so right there. If the suspension is at the employer's fault, which means they cannot give the employee any work or whatever else, whatever would qualify as that, the employee shall be paid the full salary under the employment contract, which means that they must pay you anyways or let you go. That's it. Clause 2, if the suspension is at the employee's fault, the employee shall not receive the salary. If this leads to suspension of work of other employees in the same unit, they shall be paid an amount not smaller than the statutory minimum wages. So I'm not really too sure about this one, but I think that if one employee decides to stop their work and it's their fault, and if other employees decide to follow suit, then the other employees will be paid not lower than statutory minimum wage, but the employee themselves that started it will not be paid anything. So suspended, not terminated. There's a big difference. All right, Clause 3. In the case the suspension is caused by an electricity or water supply issue that is not at the employer's fault, or by a natural disaster, fire, major epidemic, like COVID-19, hostility, relocation requested by a competent authority, or for economic reasons, both parties shall negotiate the salary as follows. Major epidemic. That means COVID-19. So if it happened during the school year and we have to stop work, like what happened in May 2021 after everybody came back from vacation, yeah, I still remember that. After vacation, the virus exploded and we were told to stay home from school 5th of May. And yeah, we weren't paid the other 30 days that we were told to stay home, even though we should have been. So moving on. Rolling up so we can go ahead and get through this. Time is currently, let me see, 16:50. So we're going to go ahead and move on. 16 minutes, 50 seconds. Moving on. If the suspension does not exceed 14 working days, the salary shall not fall below the statutory minimum wages. So, yeah, if it doesn't exceed 14 days, then it should not fall below that. Now, statutory minimum wages. Again, Region 1, Ho Chi Minh City, 4,600,000 and oh shoot, I'm gonna have to go ahead and look at this again. Not really too good at remembering numbers, so let's go ahead and try this again. All right, calculate it again. 4 million. Okay, let's do this. 4,420,000 times 0.6%, 0.06% equals this plus this. Okay. All right, $4,420,000. So the Region 1 minimum wage for Ho Chi Minh City is $4,685,200. For some reason, I was thinking $645,000. I don't know why. Anyways, let's move on. So there we go. B and B. Now, if the suspension is longer than 14 days, working days, that means Monday through Friday, usually, but Monday through Saturday in most cases. The salary shall be negotiated by both parties, and the salary for the first 14 days must not fall below the statutory minimum wages. So essentially, if the employer wants to pay statutory minimum wages the entire month, then that's their choice, but it must not fall below that. If they want to pay higher, that's on them. So it means both parties. That means you and your employer. Salary payment through the contractor's foreman. this does not apply to English teachers at all, because that's for a lot of that. This is doesn't really apply to us. So we're going to go ahead and move on. Now, in case you want to go ahead and look at these, you can later on. I don't mind. You find your own copy of the labor code and look through this on your own. I'm only teaching about the stuff that actually applies to English teachers, foreigners, and locals who are curious about the labor laws here in Vietnam. Moving on, salary advances. This is something that does happen from time to time. Clause 1. An employee may receive an interest-free salary advance in accordance with conditions agreed on by the two parties. Clause 2. Interest-free salary advance. This means you do not pay extra to receive your salary on conditions agreed upon by two parties. Clause 2. The employer must make the advance payment to the employee for the number of days the employee temporarily leaves his or her work in order to perform duties of citizens for a period of 1 week or longer, but the advance shall not exceed 1 month's salary. The employee must reimburse the advance. Now, this applies, in my opinion, only to local citizens, because it says here, temporarily leaves his or her work in order to perform duties of citizens for a period of 1 week or longer, but the advance shall not exceed 1 month's salary. This applies only to local citizens. Now, an employee who is conscripted in accordance with the law on conscription may not receive salary advance. Obviously, local citizens only. Moving on. When taking annual leave, as we discussed in Article 113, an employee shall receive an advance payment of at least salary for the entitled days of leave. Shall receive an advance payment of at least salary for the entitled days of leave, which means they're supposed to give you this money in advance before you take your vacation. So yeah, Article 113, they're required to give it to you before you take your vacation. It says so right there. English, Vietnamese, right there. All right, moving on. We have about 12 minutes left before this video is dropped on YouTube, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Salary deductions. Again, English and Vietnamese. We're going to go ahead and do this. Clause 1. An employer shall have the right to deduct from an employee's salary only for the compensation for the damage to the employer's equipment and assets in accordance with Article 129 of this labor code. Right there. This is another article that supports the argument that you do not pay for your work permit, you do not pay for your TRC card. The employer cannot make you pay for that. They pay for that. Now, just remember this, Article 102, Clause 1. Moving on. Same thing right over here. Moving on. Now, the Clause 2, the employee has the right to be aware of the reasons for the deduction. So if you're an evil English center and you like to go ahead and take money out of people's salary and not tell them why, yeah, that's illegal. You can't do that. This law here says you must. And this law here in Vietnamese also says you must. So you can't play dumb and say, I don't understand English, when you clearly do. That's the other reason why I go and post English and Vietnamese here. Because some English centers, the evil ones, and these are the ones I'm talking about, are the ones who claim not to know any English, but yet when you argue with them, their English is flawless. I've had that. Now, moving on. Clause 3, any monthly deductions shall not exceed 30%. 30% of the net salary of the employee. But remember, it should not exceed this. Does not mean you must do 30%. No, it should not go above 30%. After the payment of compulsory social insurance, unemployment insurance premiums, and personal income tax. So after you pay all that, the net salary after that, they can deduct up to 30%, but 30% is not the norm. All right, so that's Clause 3. Clause 3, pay rise. Again, reason why I'm teaching you all this stuff before I go over the actual parts of the employment contract you need to know is that you know what you need to know before you sign an employment contract here in Vietnam. This way you know what to look for. Is the employer being legitimate, or are they going to treat you badly? Yeah, there's a lot you can learn from an employment contract. So, moving on. Article 103, pay rise. Pay rises, or pay raise, as they're known in the States, Pay rises, including increases in salary, pay grades, allowances, benefits, and other types of incentives for an employee, shall be agreed upon in the employment contract or the collective bargaining agreement or stipulated in regulations of the employer. So there is an article that talks about pay rises, but some employers may not give pay rises, such as, very small mom and pop shops. They may not give pay raises. But larger places that should give pay raises will give pay raises, because it has to be a part of all this. Again, I'm going to read it one more time. Pay rises, including increases in salary, what you get every month, pay grade, like a higher pay grade than what someone else gets, an allowance, like if you get a fuel discount, benefits and other types of incentives, such as, you get a bus ticket, or you go ahead and get free coffee or free food or something like that, shall be agreed upon in the employment contract, which means it will be in the contract or collective bargaining agreement. It must be on paper, not verbal. Must be on paper. So if your employer promises you the moon and the stars and they only give you a bucket of dirt, yeah, that's not right. That's called bait and switch. That's why you can trust an employer to speak all day long, but it's what's on paper. That's what counts. So, moving on. Article 104, bonuses. Bonuses is a big thing. A lot of people like the bonuses. So, in bonuses, Clause 1, a bonus means an amount of money, a piece of property, or item that is provided by an employer for his or her employees on the basis of the business performance or the employee's performance. Clause 2, a bonus regulation shall be decided and publicly announced at the workplace by the employer after consultation with the representative organizations of employees, if any. So there should be a bonus regulation already at your place of business. If there's not, there should be. So we got about 8 minutes left. I'm going to see what else I can talk about real quick before I have to stop, because I'm going to use the whole 25 minutes if I can. So we've already gone over like pay raises, bonuses, and stuff like that. So we're going to go ahead and move on here, because this is other stuff you need to know. Working hours and rest periods. Yep. Now, some of this stuff may not apply to English teachers, but let's just roll with it anyways. So, Chapter 7, Working Hours and Rest Periods. Section 1, Working Hours. Article 105, Normal Working Hours. Clause 1, normal working hours shall not exceed 8 hours per day or 48 hours in a week. That means 6 times 8 is 48. So, yeah, 6 times 8 is 48. So, Clause 2, an employer has the right to determine the daily or weekly working hours and inform the employees accordingly. So, yeah, they do have the right to decide their own hours. The daily working hours shall not exceed 10 hours per day and not exceed 48 hours per week, or a weekly basis is applied. So if you get paid every week, then you should not work more than 10 hours per day and no more than 48 hours a week. And right here, the state encourages employers to apply 40-hour work weeks. So if you're working 48 hours a week, the state says that you should work 40 hours a week instead. Now, Clause 3. Employers shall limit the time of exposure to harmful elements in accordance with relevant national technical regulations and laws. Now, why that's there? Don't know. But that's just the way it is. All right, so working hours at night. If you work more than 8 hours in a day or 48 hours in a week, that's not good. Article 106, working hours at night. This is what I was talking about for overnight. See, it says right there, 106, 106. All right, cool. Let's move on. Working hours at night is the period from 2200 hours, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. Right there, 2200 hours to 6 a.m. That's night shift, usually. Overtime work. One of my favorite parts to talk about. We got about 6 minutes left, so let's see exactly what we can do. All right, so overtime work. Overtime work is the duration of work performed at any other time than during normal working hours, as indicated in the law, collective bargaining agreement, or internal labor regulations of an employer. Clause 2. An employer has the right to request an employee to work overtime when all the following conditions are met. And again, English and Vietnamese, and we're going to scroll up. At any time, you can go ahead and pause this video so you can go ahead and read more in detail, because I yammer on for a while. So let's move on. Subclause A, the employee agrees to work overtime. If they agree, that's awesome. If they don't agree, you can't force them. Do not force your employees to work overtime. Bad idea. We have 5 minutes left. Subclause B. The number of overtime working hours of the employee does not exceed 50% of the normal working hours in one day. In the case of weekly work, the total normal working hours plus overtime working hours shall not exceed 12 hours in one day and 40 hours in 1 month. Now, what this means is that the normal working hours in one day, that means 8 hours per day. So for daily work, they are not allowed to work more than 12 hours total per day for daily work. For weekly work, we work every single week. Now, again, that's like Monday to Saturday with Sunday off normally. Normal working hours, 8, plus overtime working hours shall not exceed 12 hours in one day and 40 hours in 1 month. Yeah. So, yeah, that's pretty much self-explanatory right there. Subclause C. The total overtime working hours do not exceed 200 hours in 1 year except for the cases specified in Clause 3 of this article. Yeah, that right there. This is what English teachers qualify for. Because a lot of English teachers like to put in a lot of overtime, and that's fine. But don't exceed more than 200 hours because labor law says you shouldn't do that. And for English centers out there, don't work your employees more than 200 hours in a year or else you're going to get in trouble for it. Because it says so right there. Vietnamese, 200 hours in 1 month. Now, except for the case in Clause 3 of this article. Clause 3. An employer must not request an employee to work overtime exceeding 300 hours in 1 year in the following fields, works, jobs, and cases. None of this stuff applies to English teachers, but I'm just going to read it anyways because it's already in there. So, Clause 3. Yeah, we already read that. Okay, so subclause A, manufacturing, processing of textile, garment, footwear, electronic products, processing of agricultural, forestry, aquaculture products, salt production. Subclause B, generation and supply of electricity, telecommunications, refinery operation, water supply and drainage. Subclause C, works that require highly skilled workers that are not available on the labor market at the time. Subclause D, urgent works that cannot be delayed due to seasonal reasons or availability of materials or products, or due to unexpected causes, bad weather, natural disasters, fire, hostility, shortage of power, raw materials, or technical issues of the production line. Double D, other cases as prescribed by the government. And again, English and Vietnamese. Now, scrolling on up, as decided by the government, deal with a slash through it. Number 4, we have about 2 minutes left. Awesome. Clause 4. When organizing overtime work as prescribed in Clause 3 of this article, the employer shall send a written notification to the Provincial Labor Authority. So, Clause 3, right there, they must submit a written notification to the Provincial Labor Authority. But English teachers don't really qualify for that stuff I just mentioned. So, there we go. The government shall elaborate this article, Clause 5. So, we got about 2 minutes left. 2 minutes left. Let's see. We could probably talk about this last bit, and then we're going to have to go ahead and keep going. So, Section 2, rest periods. Article 109, rest periods during working hours. We got 2 minutes left. Clause 1, an employee who works for at least 6 hours per day under Article 105 of this code shall be given a rest break of at least 30 consecutive minutes. In cases of night work, the rest break shall be at least 45 consecutive minutes. That means 45 total minutes and 30 total minutes, not, 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there, blah, blah, blah. If a shift lasts at least 6 consecutive hours, the rest break will be included in the working hour, which means you go ahead and work at least 6 hours, you get 6.5, and they must pay you for it. They must pay you for it. At least that's the way I see it. It doesn't say that they must pay you, but I think they should, because it says so right here, the break will be included in the working hour, so that they should pay you. Clause 2. In addition to the rest break prescribed in Clause 1 of this article, the employer shall determine other short breaks and specify that in the internal labor regulations. Remember, ladies, again, remember what I talked about in the gender equality laws. You are allowed 2 additional breaks, so please remember that. Now, we got about 50 seconds left until we hit the 25-minute mark, so I'm going to go ahead and, try and wrap this up as quickly as I can, because like I said, we got about less than 5 minutes left, so we got to go ahead and do this. All right, so one more thing. We got to go ahead and bust through it. Article 109, right up there. Article 110, breaks between shifts. An employee who performs shift work is entitled to a break of at least 12 hours before beginning another shift. So, yeah, if you do shift work, you're entitled to a break of at least 12 hours. Now, Article 111, weekly breaks. Let's see if we can try and get through this article, weekly breaks. So, okay, let's see if we can try and plow through this quickly. All right, so Article 111, weekly breaks. Each week, an employee is entitled to a break of at least 24 consecutive hours. When it is impossible for the employee to have a weekly day off due to the work cycle, the employer has the responsibility to ensure that on average, the employee has at least 4 days off per month. Clause 2. The employer has the right to determine and schedule the weekly breaks either on Sunday, which is normal, or for another fixed day in the week, which must be recorded in the internal labor regulations. And Clause 3. In case a public holiday falls on an employee's weekly break, coincide with a public holiday as prescribed in Clause 1, Article 112 of this article of this labor code, he or she will have compensatory time off on the next working days. That's what I went and mentioned in the video specifically labeled Article 112. Now, we already went over that, so we're going to go ahead and try and get done with this as quickly as possible. We have exactly 4 minutes left until this video is over. So I hope I've given you all a lot to think about today. We'll be coming out with the next video very soon. I think this one is going to go ahead and talk about employees' rights, like what happens when an employee decides to quit. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and like, share, subscribe, comment on this video, share with all your friends. Again, I want to reach everyone in Vietnam and everyone all around the world to let them know about the labor code and what they should look out for before they decide to come to Vietnam. This way you come from a position of strength and you can go ahead and dictate terms on your terms. If you want to donate, my bank account that I use does accept VND as well as currency from all over the world, as it's an international bank account. If you want to donate to me, please go ahead and send me an email or go ahead and message me on the Google Chat app at tuxedoshadow@gmail.com. If you also want to go ahead and send me goods and services, such as, again, you keep seeing that pop up that I don't have any antivirus, an antivirus subscription or, software, hardware, stuff like that. Again, message me or send me an email and I'll go ahead and let you know on how to do that. As far as food goes, if you want to donate food to me and stuff like that, that's cool too. And make sure it's not perishable because I live in Vietnam. And if people want to send me food from all over the world, well, you got to go ahead and make sure that it's safe to actually send it first. If you live in Vietnam and you want to send me food, that's cool too. I can accept, fresh food if you're in Ho Chi Minh City. And yeah, so we're going to go ahead and cut this video short. I'm going to go ahead and let everybody know, how it goes, and we'll go ahead and move on from there. So, yeah, next video coming out is what to do when you're an employee and you want to quit. Stay tuned, folks.